Okay, so this is week 12, and as I said in the announcement last night, this is actually the second last class. I completely forgot that next Friday is a holiday, so there's no class next Friday. So week 13 is canceled, and what I'm going to do today is I'll go through the presentation, the week 12, and I'll just very quickly highlight what I would have said in week 13. I'll do week 13 in 2 minutes, which is crazy, but I'll just get the message across. So that'll be that. And then after the material, if there's any questions about the final presentation, feel free. And then, yeah, then 2 weeks from today, it's your show. And that's the end of the class. Disturbingly, that went ridiculously, ridiculously fast. So let's get right into it. First thing, I wanted to look at just a couple of these discussion topics. Great answers, and this was just some, the ones I'm showing are just screenshots of some of the ones that were written. So I don't remember whose they are. If you recognize them, awesome. This one I want to highlight, the talk was collaboration. So out of all the stuff we're doing, the comment here is how everybody's being brought together. There needs to be an investment in education and training. Is there a possibility to standardize across companies and from those companies to our clients? So we bring to them standards as opposed to us trying to bring a whole bunch of different standards together. And, at the end of the day, we're all working together on projects, and if we're all working differently, it's all going to be complex. And this is one reason why, a lot of my stress in week 5 and 6 was about collaborating, was about sharing how we actually bring these workflows and ideas together, because at the end of the day, it's not all going to be in one house, leading to interoperability. And this was great. Here, this is why the assignments I give you are not, we have 5 disciplines all working in Revit, all sitting in one office. You would come back to me and say, yeah, who cares, Brent? That's nothing. Exactly. This is the biggest issue. And when you're working on international projects, the prevalence of Revit lowers. And it's interesting that here in North America, BIM and Revit, so BIM is Revit, is a huge myth. But if I go to Scandinavia, Germany, Australia, India, BIM isn't Revit. They don't think that. That's not an ingrained myth because of the use of the more prevalent use of multiple authoring tools. And if you get out of the buildings industry into the civil infrastructure or the plant industrial projects, Revit might not even exist. But, and I'm thinking of my water and wastewater background, you have a mix of Bentley's plus Aviva, or Intergraph and Aviva, Intergraph and Bentley, and this is just common practice. So the ability to be interoperable is very critical. And of course, planning on how you're going to do it, how things are going to interrelate with each other is critical right at the front. The as-built, definitely a challenge. So that entire workflow process map on who's going to do it and when and why, that's very important. And it often gets overlooked at the front end of projects. So this one stood out to me because of that. We go through this on every project. The question is, who's doing it and to what detail? And that's what's important. The whole point of the BIM execution plan, if you state the model will be used for as-built drawings because there's going to be some type of turnover, great. How? Just answer the question, or make the statement that this needs to be defined, and then follow up and define it on the project. And of course, my passion is in asset management, and this is very challenging because, as said here, if it's not thought about at the front end, so week 2, right? If it's not talked about, how do you know? How do you ensure software interoperability if you don't know what's being done and what's going to happen to that information at the back end of the project? how do you collaborate and here, not just with the design team to make sure you're modeling what's needed, but how do you collaborate with the stakeholders? So at Turner Fleischer, we have internal development teams, and one of them is the FM dev team. And I lead that team, passionate, love it. And we're using our office as an example. So it's going to be, we're going to say to clients, hey, we do digital twins, we do asset management, we're building this service, come to our office and experience it. So we're doing a mass renovation to the office. So the first question on our call yesterday was, so what are we managing? And we said, great question. We're our own client, but let's get with defining the client requirements. So get with that team who's doing the renovation, and let's define what are those assets that we want to make sure are connected and controllable inside the digital twin system, the asset management system that we're putting in place. And once we define that, we'll figure out where's all that data and how does it all come together, et cetera, et cetera. And I make it sound easy, but it should be easy if it goes through the proper process and yields the result. So good stuff. With this being the last discussion topic, I'd welcome feedback. Either send me a message, or I think the students or the survey of the feedback. What's your opinions, your views on those discussion topics? Are they beneficial? With this being a hybrid course, it's supposed to be 2 hours together and 2 hours outside of hybrid-based learning. So in my view, what I've said was, those discussion topics, that's a piece of that hybrid, and then assignments, quizzes, everything else. I know you probably spend more than 2 hours a week on some of that stuff, but in a balance overall, that's my view of how to make a hybrid course work. Very interested in your opinions on the discussion topics, particularly when you provide feedback, if you're willing to provide feedback. So, and I know oftentimes students say, yeah, I'll wait till I get my grade, wait till you get your grade, it's all good. But I'd be very interested in the feedback. So let's go to the presentation here. So this one, it'll go quickly. I'm going to go through some uses of BIM uses, and then this ends part with these diagrams. I'm not going to dwell on these, and depending on timing, I'll see how much to show when we get to those diagrams, just because I know I'm trying to cram in a couple of sessions here all at once. So jumping in. So what I wanted to talk about first off is, when we're thinking of BIM uses, and in particular here, I'm thinking of specifications. I wanted to plant the seed of component classification. So just a reminder, let me see if I can minimize my Zoom window. Okay, never mind. Never mind. So BIM is the collection of whole. We can do reviews, etc. We're made up of disciplines, separate models coming together to a virtual whole that are all made up of components. All of these components carry something. These are the things that you will connect data to, that you will harness in an asset management system, that you will connect to IoT sensors. These are the things. And when I show that, people will say, ew, why? What are these special things? But think about it. Doors have card readers, might have infrared biometric scanners, stuff of that nature. A sink, you might have an automated mechanism so it senses there's a person in front of it. You might want to track water flow, water temperature, energy consumption, etc. All of that just from this fountain. So you never know how much information you might need. All these mechanical components, there's moving parts, there's gaskets, filters, replacements, motorized components, pumps and valves, you name it. A lot of stuff that get operated. So what we do is we assign classification codes based on systems to define at every level anything that goes into the system. So facilitates easy querying, easy cost estimation, allows us to span multiple files, multiple models, multiple facilities, supports all those downstream uses. But we have problems. In our industry today, there's multiple systems. Use of the systems are inconsistent, and they're not really well understood, to say the least. So Uniclass is one system that exists, and I don't expect you to memorize any of these, but I want you to see the trend here. 15 tables of alphabetized, alphabetical tables, and it kind of goes something like this, where you have multiple codes that equal something. So an external door is that, external walls is that, but an external concrete wall is that. So G251 is a wall, but G25113 is an external concrete wall. So the deeper the code, the more detailed the classification. Then they upgraded to Uniclass 2 just to make it more convoluted. So in the world of Uniclass alone, used in the UK, Australia, and many, many places across the globe, you have two systems, pretty complex, pretty robust though, okay? Master format, North America, we use this as the premise for material-based specifications. I'm most familiar with this, sponsored by the Canadian Spec Institute, Construction Specs Institute, or the Canada Specs org. 50 divisions, used to be 16. Each division represents a material category, and everything we design falls under one of these. So when I stress the importance of drawings plus specifications, everything we have in, so in an architectural drawing, I model a door. A door is an opening. A door is going to have a material finish, so it might be anodized aluminum, it might be painted, it might be coated. That'll be in Division 9. We're going to have walls. They might be in Division 4 if they're masonry, Division 3 if they're concrete, so it all depends on materiality. All the other disciplines, you can see here mechanical, so Division 21, 22, 23, that's your mechanical. Integrated automation is a brand new division focusing on IoT and communications. Sorry, IoT-based communications is its own, telephone, cable, etc. Regular electrical, 26. Your earthworks are 30. Some specialty ones up in the 40s, and reserved sections for new and special and different things. Uniformat is an older system, very much in the United States, but again, connected to our specs, 7 categories, same concept you can see here. A10 are foundations, A1030 is your slab on grade, so your foundation, slab on grade, etc. So all with the same concept. Omniclass, it was designed as, press mute if you can, I'm getting feedback. Or I'll mute whoever is not muted. Was it you? Okay, cool. Yeah, just make sure you stay on mute unless you have a question. Omniclass was, they came in and said, hey, we recognize that there is a problem, so let's make a whole new system that takes the best of all the other systems. Sure, problem is it wasn't used that way, it wasn't adopted globally, but it's the same concept, multiple tables, has a category, so here's exterior vertical enclosures, okay, to 20, add the 10, the enclosure is the wall, 20 is the window, and then the next level 10, 20, 30, 40 is something particular about what it is. Is it operable, fixed, etc. So a lot of detail, etc. Deeper you go in your number, the more detailed your component. So what does that all mean? Brent, why are you boring us? Well, I'll tell you why I'm boring you. It's fun. So the idea is, and I've showed this slide many times, anything we place in the model has connectivity to something else. If we carry a classification system, it's easier to connect. In the world of design, I couldn't care less. It does nothing for me. The biggest value I could get is potentially a connection to a specification if I was looking solely at the world of design. But if I put my BIM hat on and I said, you know what, there's more than just design, it's powerful. So inside our BIM authoring tools, this is Bentley. If I go to place a door, look at what Bentley does for me. It fills out all this stuff. So Bentley has said, I don't know what you're going to use this information for, but if you classify something as a door, at the bare minimum, we're going to give you the high level categories of the door. And notice in here, I don't know this NTE classification. I don't even speak that language. I believe that's Spanish, but it could be Portuguese. I don't know. No, okay. So thank you, Andrea. So it's Spanish. That's built in. There was another one here that I didn't know. Oh, it doesn't matter. Oh, this one here, NAT spec, sure. Again, a system I don't know. So their view is as they keep upgrading their software, they'll just add more and more classification tables and do the work for you, which is kind of cool. Audio zooming in. So there you go. And they do this for everything. If I place a structural steel column, it's filled in. If I place a chair, it's filled in. And if there isn't, notice here NTE, if there isn't an entry for the chair, they just leave it blank. So this is very, very powerful because then if I think of specs trying to read into my model, if for example, it's looking for a master format classification and it says, hey, I see ductwork and I see that that's the master format spec, automatically it'll go and find the spec for me. NAT spec is the Australian one. Awesome. Thank you, Andrea. Good stuff. See, I didn't know that. All right. And so this is in Bentley's EcoSim, which is now Open Buildings. They basically have backbone tables for all of these systems. So they do all the work, they connect it to major categories, and they empower you to say, well, you know what? I'm going to take one and maybe augment it, and it gives you the power to change. Inside, sorry, I wonder if I can hide this. This is really bothering me. That's okay. Sorry, you can't see. My Zoom control panel is right on the top part of my side. So here again, the same example. In Revit, the table is existing. And I'm not sure, this slide was done in Revit 2016. I believe they've added most of the categories or most of the classification tables already. And usually you add that as a parameter under the assembly code. And again, it's there to be queried. If it carries with, you can do it at the category or at the component, so the instance itself. Oftentimes at the category is good enough because most instances of a family carry the same master format spec type or omni-class classification. Okay. So that, again, same concept, structural, mechanical, electrical, everything's built in. So when I want to harness this information, so what do? 4 steps. I like doing this. What is the component? How do you model it? What's your data? And what's your identifier? So when I brought this up, I talked about this previously, I think, but you know, it's very difficult or nearly impossible now to model without knowing what you're modeling. And I always say, try modeling a door in Revit without calling it a door. I don't even know how to do that. I'm sure you could. I think it would be a lot of work and it would just be silly, right? Model what has to be modeled, understand this data. So the native BIM authoring tools are now making the native data more and more robust. So right now, I always say the bare minimum of BIM. So I remember back in the 3D world, 3D design back 20 years ago, you would model something in 3D and actually apply a tag to state what it is. And that was crazy. Now it does that. So I don't have to tag something and call it a door. But the information from the software is now also telling me it's a door with this master format number, this omni-class number, this uni-class number. All of a sudden, I have a robust set of information that I can do a whole lot with. And I just might need unique instances, unique identification for that component itself, so I can identify it from its like components scattered across the model. So I talked about, I think I showed parts of this in a previous one, but here's all that information. Door gets placed in, here's all the component data. Now, all the data I attach to a component has to be done for a purpose. So the reason why the software has placed in the component classification is because there's downstream purposes depending on your BIM workflows that you're implementing. If I'm not doing cost estimation or asset management, then the data sits there and I don't care. If I am, I need it. My BIM workflow of drawings and schedules, though, very important, because as an architect with a door, I need this data. This data ties to a spec. So I need that spec. And it happens by default, no matter what, it's always there. Therefore, having this data in my model empowers me to do more with that information. I have the instance unique identifier. I've got the geometric particulars of the instance, material, and then all of that subsequent information that I need in order to move forward. So the components are in there. I have the confidence everything's right. Everything from the BIM process is in place, but all that data for all these components all have some form of a classification that I can then further connect to really all my other design information, all my design data, and potentially to downstream. This here was one of the stations for Eglinton Crosstown, LRT. So BIM and specs, metadata, the term metadata is information about information, or in the BIM world, information about components. Spec data or spec specific metadata can be added, this enriching the eye of the BIM. So I reference tools like SpecWave and eSpecs. At Turner Fleischer right now, I'm doing a massive, what's the word I'm looking for? Mission or task to identify a proper, or to bring to fruition a data-driven spec workflow. So these tools, SpecWave and eSpecs, are two of the vendors that we're pursuing. A couple other ones are NBS Chorus, VisiSpec, Chalkline, and a couple others, all with the concepts of, I have a model, I have specs, let me connect these two. So the models are queried, and they trigger actions into intelligent specs. So if I have that spec, when I talk about the wheel of BIM, and I say we're going to do specifications, and then we have a BIM workflow about specs, all the ins and outs from the models to the specs are what's being created here. So if you've played with specifications, I feel sorry for you, because I've done in my career, and they're terrible. Specifications are one massive Word document, and they suck. That's all. And it's the worst thing, yet it's the most important thing. So in the world of legal, if I get sued, so everything's about if I get sued, unfortunately, but if I get sued, they're going to look at my drawings and they're going to see something. Then they're going to pull up my specs. And whatever is in the spec governs what's over those drawings. And if my spec is wrong or I'm missing stuff, I'm in trouble. So if I could automate or create the specs in a way that is not just a nasty Word document, I can benefit. So I'm going to just talk through here what the concept of SpecWave was, but they're all similar. Inside the model, here's using master format. I'm able to select the 49 division spec section. So I know that if I place a component, it's going to be specified. So if I place a door, it's going to be a spec within Division 8. Now, what kind of door? So hopefully your model is intelligent enough that your family or your component, you know that it's an aluminum door versus a wood door versus a steel door. Then I'm able to select the correct section that's based on aluminum versus steel versus wood, etc. So any component in the model, I'm able to select the section. So here you're looking at standard hollow metal door. It's 8, 11, 13. Normal metal windows, 8510. These are standard specs. I don't make these up. You just select them. That's the spec number from the Spec Institutes. If I place a chair is a piece of furniture, 1250. Okay? And they all go on and on. Same examples for steel. You can see the spec sections here that are coming up here. Then what happens, this here is showing e-specs, looking at the Frank Lloyd Wright falling water model in Revit, but it doesn't matter what model, it's all the same stuff. So SpecWave, eSpecs, Chorus, Chalkline, VisiSpecs, they all do the same thing. They drop in an add-on into whatever BIM authoring tool they're compatible with. And notice that, whichever they're compatible with. Unfortunately, there's no one answer for everything. Then it brings up your spec. And the beauty of these systems is it says, we're going to take the industry standard specs that normally existed in a Word file and turn them into a database. So in a nutshell, to make complexity simple, it'll say, take a portion of the Word document and it's now a data entry. The most important ones are the products. So do section 2, part 2 of each spec section lists out all the products. So using door, I'll keep using doors as an example. If I know I'm going to have a door, I go to the door spec, the product will list what it is. Is it vendored from Sherwood Doors or whoever the vendor is? And we're just building a relationship between the product of the spec and the component in the model. So if I see door, I need a spec for the door. Which one is it? And if I see door and the door is called aluminum door and it's already got a spec assigned in that metadata, the relationship is very easy. If I have no special selections inside my model and my family name just says wood door, all right, I see door, I got to make sure it's going to wood spec, wood door spec. So that's all it does, builds relationships. Inside the system, each component is a data entry. So each section is a piece of data that could be related. And that's all it does. This is the SpecWave. And again, I don't know how Bentley brands this these days, but it doesn't matter. Same concept. Each portion of what used to be a Word document is turned into a component that can be related to something else in a model. And that's it. And then you interact, and it's more like a database. Turn on all standards for ASTM. Turn off all standards for ULI. Build all my relationships. Make sure I have sealant. Make sure I have fireproofing. And all of a sudden, all these relationships are activated. The other thing with specifications is one spec relates to another spec. So if I have a door, and I'll keep picking with my doors, if I have a door, there's going to be sealant around the door. So if I have a door spec, I must have a sealant spec. If I have a door spec that has a piece of glass in it as a window, I gotta have the glass spec. So it builds all these relationships, and it builds that while scanning my model. So right away, when I put door in the model, if my family has a piece of glazing and I say, hey, I need that door spec, wood door, metal door, whatever it is, it'll also give me the window spec for glazing. And it just builds all of that. And all of a sudden, I have this connectivity of data that is so powerful. And when I need to estimate, all my information is there now. My spec information that can be queried, my model information that can be queried, and with the proper estimating tool like a Timberline, it can read all that data and bring it together. It's a very exciting world. BIM Drive is another one. This is based on US spec mostly. So ARCOM, which is now, they were just bought by somebody else. One day I've got to just sit down, lock myself in a room and update all my slides with all of the, the takeovers and the rebranding of all the software. It's ridiculous. But you could see, same concept. It's an interface looking at the material parts of the specs. Here's your spec sections, selecting pieces that aren't there, and auto-selecting pieces via tiebacks to tools like Revit. So what's good? Users, set spec information. What's bad? There's a chance I select the wrong spec. So this is a bit of the problem with Revit and with building applications in general. I could place a door and say, you know what, I'm going to select a window spec. Now I would be a fool to do that, but what if I do that by mistake? What if I place a door and start misunderstanding the Omni class, or I'm told this project needs to use Uni class and I'm trying to select the right thing and by mistake I hit the wrong one, then I copy it and then I misunderstand the number. Who knows? Who knows how? But you do the wrong one. Or in Revit, I add the wrong table. I bring in that Australian spec because I didn't know better and I just put it in the model, and I'm thinking, yeah, that's a good one. I reference in the Australian spec, the number looks like master format, and I'm just applying my master format knowledge. So I'm thinking, well, division 4 is masonry, but I don't know what division 4 is in the Australian spec, and I have chaos. You have a good set of families, 3D content, that's important because then you can set the right parameters, potentially lock it, use tools like Unify or BIM1 or one of those to manage an online content of an online library of your content, and you make sure that it's all robust and quality checked and good. The right tool to connect the specs to your model automates your generation, and that's good. What's in the model will be in your spec, but if your model is in error, so too will your spec. So that's a bad part. Good set of master specs. I was ecstatic. So I just started with Turner Fleischer. I finally this week met with the spec team, and I was ecstatic to learn that they have a good set of standard master specs based on industry standard spec systems. I said, great, that's a huge relief so that I can, achieve this BIM and specs within this firm. Specs being intelligent is important, but when they're intelligent, they're in different formats. They might be XML files or things of that nature. And thus, those spec writers that are familiar with Word files could possibly struggle with the whole workflow. So keep that in mind. So spec-driven workflows. I've alluded to this on the plant side, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about this because this was my world for a decade and a half almost, and this is why I drove to you all the importance of plant-based BIM authoring tools. These are all spec-driven. And just use it in your knowledge of Revit. Just imagine if this is how Revit worked. You'd have a lot of architects that would cry, but it would be powerful. So spec databases reside outside of the modeling tools, controlling your schematics and your BIM. So I pulled these up in the past, but this was what I was exposed to very early in my career. Control what can be done. So here, what this is showing me is for AWWA, American Waterwork Association, class C115 pipe. It's telling me that in the pipe, the only types of conditions I can have are flanged conditions. That means I have a spool of pipe, and at the end, there's a flange to bolt pipes together. So one pipe goes against another pipe. The pipe might be like that small, but the flange bolts it together, and there's a gasket in the middle. Okay, too much information, it's just ingrained in my head. This tells me the diameter of the pipe and nominal sizes. So if I say 4 inches diameter pipe, it's actually 4.8 diameter. Fine, that's just how the material works. What I can do is minimize. So imagine you're in your model and you say, I want to place a 4-inch pipe, but I uncheck that, you can't place a 4-inch pipe. And that could be on a project where, depending on what's flowing through the project, the smallest pipe might be 12 inches. So I uncheck 4, 6, 8, and 10, and 12 is the smallest you have. And maybe the largest pipe they go is going to be 24-inch, so I uncheck all the larger ones. So all of a sudden I'm controlling. So imagine in Revit, I go to place a wall and you cannot place a wall thicker than X, wider than X. I go to place a door and it restricts the door type. And architects actually have done this with doors to maintain standard door sizes. So we can only place 2200. So we might make a door family that restricts the door height. We might make a door family that restricts the width to only standard nominal sizes, 1,000, 1,200, 1,400, 2,000, right? I've seen crazy models where a door has been put in at 2320 high by, 80, 88, 80. Well, like, what are you guys doing? This door, nobody's going to make a door like that. So we try to restrict it. And that's what they've done in the plant industry. They've restricted. So I don't come in here and put a 3-inch pipe or a 12.5-inch pipe. There's no such thing according to this catalog. There's no such thing. Therefore, you cannot model it. Very powerful. Same with the existence of a valve. Valves are very powerful, and I can select what can be placed based on a certain catalog and certain condition. So if I'm placing my pipe, then you say, so if you're not familiar with a valve, just think of your water tap going out to your backyard or something like that, right? Or in your bathroom, if you go underneath the sink, there's a shut-off valve. There better be, or else you got a problem. there better be a shut-off valve under your sink. And usually it's just a lever, and that's a ball valve. Or if it's one that you crank, that is a, oh crap, gate valve. Yeah, gate valve. Thank you. Yeah. So like, I knew that. So you crank those, and there could be a selection. So in my house, for example, I when I bought it, I had gate valves that were failing. So when I replaced them with ball valves. They're easy. Just a lever. They just turn. And so like my water to the garage, very easy to turn off and on. I go under my sink in the bathrooms, and I hate those. So there could be those requirements. And then these go right back to my BIM use of asset management with my operators. So if we're designing an industrial plant, we used to sit there with the operators and we would ask that very question. So I remember in our designs, would try to use ball valves as often as possible in lieu of gate valves because of the ease of operation with them. Now it depends once you get to larger sizes, et cetera, but that's the dialogue. And then in the spec, I can limit what type of valve can be used on what type of flow, what type of material, etc. And some of these valves don't even exist for certain types of materials. And that's the power of this spec. Then inside the modeling application, if I uncheck some of those, when I go to place it, so I want a 4-way valve, the system tells me, sorry, no can do. So I'm on a flow, a pipe stream, a pipe flow. I have a service selected, and I may only be able to place one of these or 2 of these, and that's it. So a lot of piping designers, they get to know their spec. So again, think in Revit. Just imagine if I go to place, and this is going to sound stupid, but imagine I'm in a building where we said it's a secure building, no windows. All right. I go to Revit, place window. Revit says, sorry, no. That would be pretty cool. Or if I can only use certain types of doors, and this will get really complicated, but if somehow I could actually specify the door prior to my design, and I'm in my design and I go to place a wood door, Revit says, sorry, you can only place hollow metal or aluminum, or you can only place stainless steel or FRP. And then I have to go find the right family. And for me, that would be amazing. I'm not quite sure if every architect would agree with me. I've shown this image 100 times, but those same specs drive what go in these schematics, and these schematics and the model talk to each other. So in the building world, we don't have this intelligence, but we do have electrical schematics and mechanical schematics. Those electrical and mechanical have all the assets that I then want to operate as an asset manager. So if you just look around the space you're sitting in, I see my lights, my switches, my ducts, right? My diffusers. That's what I want to operate, not my walls and my paint and my whatever else I have here. Nothing too exciting in my home here. So the workflow, and this was years of how do I make my brain understand all the crap I just said. So I spent a lot of time in area 1 and 2. Build a spec narrative, and then what's called the line class spec. So the spec narrative is I sit down with the owner operator and I understand, what are we doing? Are we moving water? Are we moving wastewater, high pressure gas, steam, chemicals? What are we moving? And this, you know, think of hospitals, food processing plants, water, wastewater plants, you name it, we're moving something in all of those. So what are we moving in a hospital? We're moving oxygen. What material can move the oxygen? What type of controls do we need, right? In the operating room, turn it on, turn it off. Are they able to touch it? Is it got to be voice controlled, whatever? Then I get to the line class spec and I say, okay, I know what we need. Now let me build that requirement in my modeling application. So hospitals in Revit, we got to make sure it's built right. Plant work in a plant software, usually I grab something from the vendors and I augment it to suit my project and I get my spec. So that means I'm going to grab my catalog. Removing oxygen inside, I don't know if this is right, but PVC pipe. I grab the PVC catalog, I limit the stuff just to what I need, and that's what's available in my model. Then we have a schematic. Those schematics where I've got a source, we've got a line, we might have a couple valves, might have a branch off, and I have a target. That's a line. And then we model it. All those pieces we said would be on the line, put inside the model. And then we have the ISOs, and from the isometric, we can do the bill of materials, send that straight to the fabricator, and we have a final spec saying what was in my model. And that step 4 is huge. Think of those BIM uses: procurement, fabrication, as-built modeling. Everything is perfect. And I say that because I know everything in our design model, you talk about level of development. My God, this is, there's no, should these be at 300 or 350? Everything you're putting in that model is, I would say, from a plant perspective, verging on 400, because it's ready to be fabricated, it's going to be installed, and to get it to those components to the 400 level, it's just validation of how it was installed. But we've already put all the particulars for all the installation in place in that spec. So it's pretty powerful stuff. So, you know, when I relate this back to the building world and I get in those wonderful diagrams with Revit modelers about LODs for specific components, I shake my head saying, but you guys don't understand what it's like in the plant world. Once I do step 1 and 2, my LOD, without even modeling it yet for those components, is astronomically high. Once I get to here, I've got a thing of beauty. So much data, so much power, and I'm there like the master, you know, evil scientist there with all this good stuff. This is an isometric. This is the data that comes with it. It reads data started in that spec, housed in the authoring tool. It's all metadata. It's all there. As a fabricator, I don't need anything more than what I see right here and that dimension. Right? I know the length and I know everything I need to know about it. That's it. I make it, I deliver it. There's nothing more I need to build this thing and have it ready to go on site. It's very powerful. And I've seen like what we're talking about here, like this workflow has been in place for verging on, my goodness, now 30 years. The question, what software is this? This software here, if I remember correctly, this was AutoPlant, this example. But I'll have a bunch, like a lot of these screenshots are either OpenPlant, AutoPlant, or SmartPlant 3D, or Plant Space Piping. So those are the 4 ones that were in my experience in the past. I used too many. Example of a bill of material, querying the model, quantification, schematics, it's all there, it's all accessible. So the eye of BIM, right? That's what this is all about, really. So to make it real, this is where we get lost along the way. Everybody's pretty good right here. Everybody knows we need a content library. The robustness of the library is where we fail right off the bat. So the easiest thing, your family name sucks. Make it a good family name. Make it good so that when I look at just the name alone, I know what it is. Because some spec tools, for example, they don't look at metadata, they just identify the family. They say, hey, you have a family with no spec. Which spec do you want? Oh, if I look at the family name and it's called door 1, door 1, door 2, door 3, that kind of sucks, right? But if it's called wood door, steel door, aluminum door, I'm good, right? If you give me metadata on that family, so you call it wood door and say it's going to use the wood spec, I'm really good. That's exciting stuff. And give me a bunch of others, it's even better. So we model this stuff. And remember, I couldn't care less about modeling applications. You're going to use the proper BIM authoring tool to author the model, the proper one. If you're going to work in North America, you're probably going to use Revit, but that's okay. You know, there's other authoring tools in North America too. If you're anti-Revit, I'm not anti-Revit. I know Revit is good, but I know the other stuff is really good too. Just embrace it all. That's all I got to say. I think a couple of years ago, somebody asked, do you recommend us learning Bentley? And I'd say, yeah. If you have the opportunity to get a student version of any of the other ones, a Bentley Owl platform, a Graphisoft authoring tool, so ArchiCAD, Vectorworks, EcoSim, any of them. If you're working in the building world, get one of the others. If you only know Navisworks for model review, get Bentley View, get Solibri, get another one, just so that in your head, you've actually manipulated things in 2 different tools. That's very powerful. Model review, Navisworks, Navigator, etc., all comes together. Solibri. Don't lose sight of the information in your schematics, especially when you're talking about downstream uses. For fabricating, procuring, or doing asset management, there's information in schematics that are never in the model. In the world of water, wastewater, I'm thinking of level transmitters and heat sensors. A lot of IoT sensors that we talk about today for buildings exist in plant-based schematics. Relative humidity sensoring for water, like for pump rooms. You know, a little bit of moisture comes in, damages a $500,000 piece of equipment. It's not good. In the buildings, airflow schematics and electrical schematics, a lot of data. Okay, then all of that gets reviewed with the client in a very old computer. I'm not implying that clients are old, but that's what that computer recommends. And then we have this database. Lots of sources of data. Revit is not the database. Revit is a database. And it's a database that comes together with all the other data from everywhere. That's the database. That's where all of a sudden I have streams of data glued together where I can report or go mobile. But if I don't bring all the data together, there's no point for me to say, hey, show me all the stuff in the Revit model. And then I'm saying, well, where's my heat sensor? Well, we didn't model that. Oh, where is the in-ground heating that we're gonna run in the slab of my driveway? Oh, well, we didn't model that. We just modeled slab. Oh, and then all of a sudden, all the stuff that I need to control, it was in a schematic, not in the model, and thus, you know, it has to be in my database. So that's the important thing. That's how you make that workflow work. And, you know, we're talking about our office renovation right now. And I asked them, we said, what are the assets of importance? What do we have in the model that's important? And what do we have that's not in the model? And right away we said, well, you know, we have the desks. I said, great. Is that important? Well, every single desk, and I can't wait for this, every single desk will be electronic controlled. So it could go a stand-up desk, sit-down desk. I said, that's awesome. So those are important assets. What else do we have? Well, all of those desks, we might want to track how often they're used. So we're going to have some IoT sensors placed around tracking, okay, well, those are not modeled. So all of a sudden we started listing assets and trying to identify what are all the sources of data pertinent to all those various assets and where do they all come together. So everything's great, especially from a spec perspective. Cultural behavior is critical to success. That was identified in one of those the writings earlier. Communication. How do we come together? How do we make all elements of the team, and I hate the term drafter, but it's still used, engineer, architect, designer, drafter, come together as one team, owning the technology and collaborating with their stakeholders, right? Not shielding, break down those legal barriers and empower full collaboration. I'm going to skip, this was an IBI slide that I should have gotten rid of. So, how am I doing on time? I'm doing pretty good on time. So, back to the workflow diagrams. And I remember, I think it was in week 6, maybe, I showed the ones from the Penn State. Why? I'm just going to breeze through these again. But these were, from an IBI perspective, we kind of retooled all the Penn State ones just to brand them a little bit, give a little bit. Those Penn State ones look really bland. So we said, let's give them color, etc. Important for me is the orange, the info exchange. So when I present these, I want people to understand that there's information that comes in and information that goes out. And when I, when I look at this level 1 is the generic. So this is just your standard flow from schematic design, design development, construction documents, record. And that's quite a leap from construction document to record as built, quite a leap to say the least. But from a planning and design perspective, this is really the world. And what we create and what we deliver is all dependent on the BIM goals and the BIM uses. So this doesn't reflect, this level 1 doesn't reflect everything, but this schematic design package, this could involve a parametric design, an initial cost estimate, a draft schedule simulation, an initial export for asset management review. It all depends on what we're doing, right? The typical ones here, virtual model, create a 4D model. Notice how that's by the contractor. So in a design build, that may happen at this stage of the project. In a design bid build, it probably wouldn't. Okay, energy analysis, maybe, maybe not, depending on your BIM use. And then when we get to level 2, then we start to look at, okay, existing conditions modeling, hone in, what would we do, right? And do I zoom in? No, sorry, I don't zoom in on these, so I hope they view okay. Survey information comes in, and then compile the existing information and model. The workflow, in my opinion, is very simple. The how-to could be vastly complex. But when I do this, and I sit, because you hear everybody, oh, I don't know what to do, existing conditioning, blah. This is an incredible process, but an incredible task. But to sit down from a process perspective, it's really relatively simple. Give me all the data you have, let's compile it and see what's there. And now let's model what we have to model. And I state that very simply because it is that simple. Now, what data do we have? What do I have to get? Are we going to scan? Is it going to be a Faro scanner? Is it going to be a LiDAR? Are we doing ground penetrating scan? What are we doing? What type of data do we? I've got to answer all those questions. Am I going to go physically model with measuring tape or a laser measurer in my laptop and be modeling while I'm out there? All questions. That's all workflow. That's all required, but it's all in support of this simplified process. This is existing conditions, right? Is it heritage? And if the answer is yes, there's a whole host of questions about that. But at the end of the day, that's what I'm producing. An existing conditions model upon which I shall do my design, right? Keep it simple. And when you communicate, and this is why this bleeds into, the next time we meet, you guys are communicating. Clarity and communication. If you go on LinkedIn, people, more is less. And I know that sounds nuts, but from that perspective, more is very powerful here because existing conditions modeling is a very confusing topic. This is very powerful. Go in front of a PM and say 3 steps. And the PM will say, oh, great, I get it. And you say, awesome. Now what information do I have? Oh, I don't have anything to give you. Okay, that's the problem. not the process. The problem is we have no information, and then you work through it on the project. So this one here, again, the same concept. You're bringing in your site investigation data, and you're doing a site analysis. So data comes in, analysis comes in, and we achieve. But there's a workflow. You know, do we know where to put the building? Is it acceptable? If not, reanalyze. If it's acceptable, generate an analysis model, analyze the site data, determine your building, rock on, away we go. And this resonates to an architect. This resonates to a civil engineer, right? Now, what is this? What is site investigation data? Boreholes. Is the site contaminated? It's a big question, and I use that example from the London Olympics. We're going to put the Olympic Park in East London in Stratford Village. Awesome. Where? Well, they identified mass areas of land. Well, guess what? They were occupied with businesses, so they had to be relocated, bought out, whatever they had to do. Not evicted, but they worked with the businesses really well. Great. Once they got there, contaminated waterways, contaminated soils, needed remediation, needed accountability to the government for payment. So just hold on one second. Sorry, my son was making noise. Don't know if you guys can hear that. So that's the process. But yeah, but again, try to make it as simple as possible, and then you achieve the proper dialogue. Program analysis, planning, right? You want to bring in those initial three things: site information, the site analysis model, the existing conditions model, and then you start, and the design begins, and it grows. So what are my adjacencies, my areas, my building uses, etc.? Create my program, go through the design review process. If we're good, I've got a program model, and on to the next process. And then the next process here is design, right? So what are my modeling requirements? First process, what am I modeling? How critical is that all the time? What am I modeling? That's design authorship. If you don't know what you're modeling, stop. If you don't know what you're modeling, don't. And I can't stress that enough. And that's where we come in, LOD matrix right away. If you sit there in a project and you hear, we're modeling LOD 300, you say, no, you're not. And I've already done this a couple of times at Turner Fleischer. No, we're not. We're just not doing that. What are we modeling? And if that question cannot be answered, there's a fundamental flaw in the design team, in the relationship, in the contract. There's no BIM appendix. There's no understanding. There's no anything. If there is, we get an LOD matrix pretty quickly because people know what they're modeling. And right away, it's like, oh, wait a minute, we're not modeling base plates on columns. We're not modeling connections of columns. And we're just modeling beam and column. All right. We're just modeling foundation and slab. Okay, and all of a sudden you have the dialogue and you start to understand. You just go through the process. Identify your disciplines, create your model, validate your deliverable, and deliver each deliverable. And it's simple once you answer right at the front. And that's with everything BIM. If you skip over this piece on the front there, if you skip that, chaos, insanity, and stupidity arises. Right? I don't mean to be blunt, but maybe I do mean to be blunt because my goodness, I've been through it so many times. And then once you have those models, at whatever stage, you take that design model in and you conduct a review. So visualizations, client review models, constructability review, select, and with each of these, then you select how. How are we visualizing? What tools are we using? Max, Unity, what are we doing? VR, renderings, animations. Are we using Navisworks, Navigator, Celibri? What's the workflow to do our walkthrough reviews? So that means, is it NWD? Is it IFC? Is there a workflow? Blah, blah, blah. All compiles from that, go through the process, and we have design review information and output. Same with coordination, right? Once I have everything, Everybody has a design model. That's the input. Now, this could be done live in the design authoring tool, or it's done in a coordinating platform, so something like a Revisto. We use Revisto for shared coordination. So to do that, I need input. I need these models coming in. Works very well if your WIP environments are isolated, which I don't like. I like live WIP environments, but I'll be realistic. In the industry, there are still people working on their local lands and then feeding everything together into a Revisto, into a Ulio, into a something, right? Great. What's the workflow? This is the workflow. What's the technicality of it? Sorry, this is the process. The technicalities of the workflow can all come together. Output is the coordination model. Site utilization planning, again, if this is being done, there's your input, right? The design model, the site model, schedule. And this is normally done by the contractor to understand, okay, this is the particulars. How do we optimize the logistics of the site? Utilization plan is the output. And I'm not going to go through all the process, because the whole point of a process map is to define decision making, right? And critical breaks. If something doesn't work, go back and do it again. Don't go forward, right? Cost estimation. So look at this. 3D model is one input. That's why I always say the cost estimate. I hate doing cost estimates as a designer. We're forced to do them sometimes, but you need a cost estimator. And a cost estimator is usually brought in by the contractor, and they have a whole host of analytical methodologies and cost reports. Is your project in Ottawa versus Toronto? That alone has a cost factor, right? Versus rural Ontario, right? Go through the process, quantities, cost database, cost output. So they bring in the model, they review the quantities, they work with the BIM team, with the design teams to make sure that the quantities are coming out properly. Again, it's dependent on good design models, but obviously there's a process there. We provide those material quantities, therefore the quantities from our model have to be robust if we're trying to utilize this BIM use. 4D modeling, same concept. Our model is an input, as our productivity information, lead times. No way we'll ever know that. So I always say, you want me to do a simulation? Bottom up. That's all I'm going to tell you. You know the lead times as a contractor. So the 4D modeler is usually the contractor or governed by the contractor. So I could do it. Any of you could do it. But if you're estimating construction schedules and construction lead times, you'll probably fail. But if you're working with them, you might be successful. Structural analysis, this is very design orientated. Again, they usually need the architectural model to come in, all of their calculation information, soil, wind, seismic, snow are usually the big ones. Our model as architects brings live load and occupant load. Then they go through their process. The design model is coordinated back and forth. So this is kind of happening in conjunction with design authorship, and they're feeding and pulling from the structural design model to achieve their output. This is a BIM use that should happen all the time. I'm not going to go through all the analysis, but they're all the same concept. Design models in, analysis out, specific things they're dependent on in order to achieve the analysis. Same with a lighting analysis. Solar and weather data are very critical. And building systems analysis, sensor data, very intriguing, right? And here they bring in other analytical models. Notice here we're bringing in the record model. So if I don't have a good record model, what am I now analyzing? How do I get a building performance analysis output from a model that's not representative of what was built? So it's important when an owner says, I want to do this, and you're at the front end of design, at least there has to be an understanding that there's an effort to be done at some point in the next 5, 6, 7 years of design construction. May not happen at the front end of design, but something has to happen or this doesn't get achieved. Same with maintenance scheduling. That facilities manager wants that record model plus other sources of data. CMMS, computerized maintenance management system. So an asset management system, a building operation system, a plant SCADA system, whatever it is, feeding in for them to actually do their work. Record modeling, very important. What comes in? Design model, construction model, 4D model. I show these as separate things, potentially separate streams of data. It could all be one, it could be separate. And that's where I describe the difference between a constructor's model where components are forced up to LOD 400 versus a design model where components are halted at 300 and then just manipulated to reflect how they got built, meaning my door is here, it ended up being there, I just move it in my model. I don't add particulars about wall, rebar, bolts, connectivity, stuff of that nature. So as a facility manager owner, bring me all that data. Do I care about pour joints of walls, concrete walls? As an owner, I would say no, because it's one big hunk of concrete, and if I'm gonna cut a hole, don't care where you poured it, might care where the major pieces of rebar are, definitely care if there's a pipe encased in that wall, right? Those are the types of things. So I can bring all my stuff together. So then the last bit here, depending on where you are and what you're doing, everything I just showed back here might be completely meaningless or just not apply. So here, TTT, Thames Tideway Tunnel, massive tunnel for wastewater that was tunneled underneath City of London. So underneath the Thames River, underneath the tube lines, south, vertically south of everything that was occurring, plus the new Crossrail transit line, plus the Olympics, everything. So we basically said, okay, let's figure out what we need to get this, what they called an asset information model, the AIM. So we said work backwards, following the BS 1192 workflows. And then we said, okay, what happens here? In definition, appraisal, and award is development of design, construct, hand over to the operators. So we just started to look at, okay, what do we got to do? We've got to make an asset schema and feed that into the project model. And then, so that was done in the EIR. And then we start to build the BIM execution plan for the contractor. It was design build. That would include the designers. Deploy the assets, start the contract, whole host of people building this thing, feeding into a common data environment. The model, a technical data drop. So the assets are developed and built robustly into this model, and we're ready to turn over to construction. Construction data associated into the model, feeding into the asset information. And this was presented in front of the client. And we said, this is what BIM means. This is what it means for you, an owner, for you, the asset operator. And the particulars of how we model, why we model, et cetera, all those BIM use workflows, at this level, a client couldn't care less. He or she couldn't care how we built a model, what our families are called, how we're coordinating our design. They care that you're doing it and they declare it done, and you're getting me data that I could use, data that will grow as it's being built, so that when I'm sitting here, in this case, 10 years later, I have information I can use. This was a multi-billion pound project with a lot of things at stake. And then once it was built, we're in use, assets are deployed. In my FM system now is manipulating that data, can feed back to it, asset data, all the model data, and I can leverage and work. So what I'm going to do, let me just see how many slides I have left here. I'm going to stop there because this just gets into further detail of what we did at Thames Tideway. But I'm going to stop there because what I want to do is quickly jump and give you a quick overview of what I was going to talk about next week. So if you came on late, I know I posted that next week's class is canceled because I completely forgot that it's a holiday. So this is what I would have talked about next week. So next week, I would have started to say, okay, preamble, you guys are a week away from presenting. So next, the week after, it's all on you. So what I find when I teach with students, and you'll notice here, how often did all of you talk during the classes? Not too often, right? And that's okay, I get it. But next week, it's all about you, so you're all gonna talk. So simpler is better, less is more, especially when you're presenting. And that's something that you'll notice in my presentations. When I have a lot of words on the slide, I actually apologize to you. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, this slide sucks. And I know it does, and I kind of talk through it. I never read my slides, if you notice, maybe once in a blue moon. So I'm telling you a story, I'm telling you a purpose, and you could read my slides whenever you want, if you want. If you miss me in 3 weeks, you can pull back my slides and read through, it's all good. But this was so impactful for me, and I got this in 2008. So this came from a firm who was talking to us about accelerating business communication. And their idea was to look at, well, why do we fail when we talk? And think about this when you're meeting with your groups. So you're presenting in 2 weeks. Hopefully you've had an initial group conversation. I hope, don't wait to the last minute, but let's assume you've had conversation. And if you've done that, what if you guys are just not agreeing? So this last assignment is, look back at week 5, 3 of you had different solutions, different feedback, and you're trying to bring it all together. So if you guys are here and you're just saying, use mine, use mine, use mine, that's terrible. Don't do that, right? And what this is saying is you're only expressing your own view. Therefore, it goes down what they call the cycle of waste. So you're always defending, disagreeing, destroying the potential dialogue, and you're just creating disconnect. And you guys end your meeting, and you're just like, what did we do? We didn't have nothing productive at all. So in the conversation meter, they're saying that's down at the bottom, speaking with pretense, speaking with defensive nature. On the flip side, if you're authentic and accurate and you're basically saying, I know I have a point of view, but I also know you have a point of view. And my mission is to understand your point of view, and even better, to paraphrase it back to you. So if you're saying use mine, what you should be saying is, why are they not saying use mine? Why are they saying to use theirs? Why are they saying this opinion? Why are they saying this suggestion? And then if I could reiterate why, then it's great. So an example, hey, Brent, BIM sucks. Okay, I don't agree, but why does BIM suck to you, right? Or Revit is slow, Revit doesn't work, Revit inhibits my ability to be an architect. Oh, I've had a lot of those conversations. Tell me why. Help me to understand. Then I explain back to them, synthesize what they said. So all of a sudden they say, hey, you do understand my point of view. So maybe you are here to help me. And all of a sudden we align, act, adjust, and we're in this cycle of value. Okay? But it's all via clear communication, not being defensive. Simple is better, not being overly technical. At my old work, somebody said to me once, Brent, I speak to the directors and they don't understand what I say. You speak to them in minutes, and in minutes they're agreeing with you after an hour with me and never agreeing. And it's in the delivery. I hear people get bogged down in technical rubbish, and then the meeting is over and nothing's decided. Well, yeah, because the decision makers didn't understand the word and don't know how to decide. So when you're presenting in 2 weeks, you're presenting to me not as professor, but yes, I'm your professor, but not as professor. You're presenting to me as your potential project manager. I'm the decision maker on the project that's going to say, all right, let's take your approach and make it happen. Okay, so that's why I'm asking for presentation in that 10 minutes or less. And then when you deliver, the deliverable is the BIM execution plan plus the PowerPoint. But when you're presenting, I just want the PowerPoint. Okay, and less is more. Do not do what that my dear student did I guess that was 4 years ago now, and the presentation was just pieces of the BIM execution plan on a slide. I don't want to see your BIM execution plan when you're presenting. Clear, concise, this is what we're doing, this is why it'll work, we all agree, we're all awesome, done. That's your presentation, okay? And that's how you convey it to me. So when you have time, a moment, and you want to have a look at these, this was actually a course that was built inside IBI Group. And this one here is about business writing. And I'll tell you a story. When I was in high school and start of university, I couldn't write, let alone speak, if my life depended on it, okay? I was shy, believe it or not. I was so shy, you know? I couldn't talk in front of a class. I was so scared to go talk to a girl. It was crazy. It's just how my life was, right? But then in university, two things happened to me. I was in School of Architecture, U of T, University of Toronto. They put me in front of judges and they said, tell me why your project is good. And I said, oh, that's interesting. And one year they said, your project looks horrible. We don't like it. So tell me why you think it's worthy of a grade, let alone a passing grade. And I had 40 minutes to talk about my project after that. That was tough. And I always refer to that. That was what, 23 years ago now. I'm old. Oh, that molded me to say, you know what, I guess you could really put me in front of anybody and I can have a dialogue after that. Then there was writing. And I thought I could write. I used to write these instantly. I thought it was good in high school. I get to university, my first essay was a D. I got 58% on an essay. And I said, what do you mean? Last year in high school, I got an A. And they said, but look at how you're writing. I didn't understand. So I actually went to a writing clinic. They had one offered at U of T. And the guy put it very simply. He goes, what's the point of this paragraph, Brent? I said, well, I'm saying X. I'm saying this. Then he goes, right, but your paragraph is flamboyant, frivolous, and has all these extra useless words. Why don't you just say what you said? And I said, oh, okay. And then he goes, guess what happens, Brent? Your one page becomes one paragraph, and then you can write more focused things instead of wasting time writing frivolous stuff around your point. And I thought that was so impactful for me. Helps with my emails, right? Any of you who have emailed me, notice I'll reply. I hope I don't come across as rude, but I'm just very, here's the answer. I'll get you what you need. Answer quickly, answer clearly, professionally, no flamboyant whatever. And I've used that in my career. And that's why sometimes I struggle with LinkedIn postings, because I don't know how much to write. Because sometimes LinkedIn gets a little frivolous and, oh, look at my gloriously, wonderfully, blah, blah, blah. Well, what'd you do? I read. Oh, that's okay. That's what you did. I had to read through first. So that's what this talks about a bit. You know, think from the reader's point of view. So, you know, your PowerPoint, I know you're going to be speaking to it, but then I'm also going to read your PowerPoint. Clear, concise, formatting, accuracy. I'm very dodgy with humor. So if you use humor, be very careful how you use it, because the struggle with humor is not many people find the same thing funny. So you're sitting there presenting, you say something and your audience looks at you. And you're like, hi, sorry, whatever. And then when you're being concise, watch the words. So sentences are good. Okay, and I say this to my son. He has sometimes the never-ending string of words. Like, no, stop. Don't keep saying that I did this, which allowed me to do this, and then this, and then this, and like, no, stop, period, space, pause, think. Very clear, Okay. Fluffy phrases, omit them, omit irrelevant details. You know, we've decided to take this approach for BIM collaboration because after careful consideration and a lot of dialogue, no, just tell me your approach. We're good. You know, I know you guys are dialoguing. I know you guys are having a group. I know you may have worked well together. You may not work well together. It's all good. I'm your project manager. Just tell me the outputs, right? Unnecessary words, avoid them, you know. What else was one? So clarity is clear thinking equals clear writing. So if you know what you're doing, and I know you guys will know, once you have your solution, and that's why I think of those two assignments as less writing as possible, clarity in image, clarity in words. And they were wonderful. I give you guys credit for those assignments. They actually bring joy when I actually see those done. And I do bring those to people at work and I say, come on, man. Now my BIM coordinators, give me the diagram. Stop giving me all the fluff and words and thoughts. Put in a diagram, man. My students can do it. So very important on clarity. You know who your audience is as myself. But I would also say, keep in mind, assume I don't have the heavy technical knowledge as well, because oftentimes when we're trying to convince of the BIM process, you're speaking to people that they don't get Revit, you know? And I hear people, I'll tell you, I went, the first time I went to our IBI Group's Manchester office, there was this guy. He was the Revit guy. All right. So I went in there and talked about a bit of my history with asset management. And he stood up. Well, I have a whole new approach to the definition of what an instant parameter should be. And if I can tie my instance parameter to this class of this thing, and you should have heard him go on and on. And I'm listening. And I said, can you rephrase everything you said without using one reference to Revit or a Revit particular? And he looked at me. And then I said, no, seriously, rephrase your whole thing. And he got mad at me. And I said, all right, what a great way to start IBI. That was 6 years ago. But he couldn't do it. He could not tell his story. And I know what he was talking about, but he could not tell his story without using all of the key phrases and languages of Revit. And when I hear Revit people do that to me, like, because I hear the word instance parameter overused, and I'll say, oh yeah, instead of using instance parameter, can you please use the term data group entry? Go. And then they stop. And then I say, what's the problem? Use data group entry. Use data group catalog and data group entry. Well, they don't know what that is. Then I say, so imagine you're telling your story to someone. You're assuming they know Revit instances and Revit family parameters. You're assuming they know them, but they don't. So genericize it. Make it something that people understand so that they know, because I'll throw back the Bentley equivalent of what I hear with the Revit, stumps the entire team and just proves the point that we're drowning in the technical and not actually conveying the intent. So keep that in mind. Consistency in what you're saying. Verb tense, that's a huge one. It's a huge one for me, and I don't know if a lot of people care, but if you decide we're going to speak in the present tense, speak in the present tense. So don't write a sentence, say, today we're going to model this room, and we decided that we're going to do this, and we've outlined that. They're like, just keep it all, like, you shouldn't have sentences that are present and past. If it's all past, as a group, we decided on this. As a group, we designed this, then everything's in the past. So just try to keep that consistent. Be mindful of your 5 W's, who, what, where, when, why. You know, and when you think about that, this is a trick question. Which one is the most important? It honestly depends on what you're doing. So the 5 W's, why you're doing it could be very critical if you're at the front end of the project. Who, you know, depending on where you are in the project, what you're doing when you're executing, you know what I mean? So depending on where you are, all of those are important. And yeah, I guess that's it for this one. And then the other one was just going to be a quick one on effective communication. And this one here, I don't know what's worthy of highlighting here. Um, Clearly defined, carefully delivered, and commitment to mutual understanding. So you think of that, you're committed to making sure I understand the same way I am when I speak to you. So clarity, and be careful with how you word what you say, right? And just be clear in how you say it. We all have passion, which is great. But yeah, clear and careful communication is important. Um, I do see your faces. Oh, that's, yeah, you guys are all presenting with your cameras on. Let's be very, very, very clear with that. So I assume that would be assumed, but let me just make sure. And I'll tell you to turn all your cameras on. So if you're presenting, it's like, okay, let me tell you about this project. It's like, wow, you don't give a damn about it, right? So just, that's important. And that's why I do turn my camera on, so that, you see my face, and hopefully I convey a bit of the passion for what I teach you, because I do enjoy this stuff. And like, if you saw me teaching, okay, here we are, we're in week 12. Oh my God, okay, we're almost done now. Like, what kind of a problem? It would be terrible, actually, right? So that's the big takeaway there, right? These three C's, and know that people are looking at your body language, okay? And it's just so powerful and I've seen that with my teams and my students, that, however I deliver what I deliver, there's something in that relationship that just helps in this delivery. So, and I'll admit, when your camera's on and I do see some of your reactions and your smiles and your, even the head nods, that's great. And I wish Zoom would let me open all of you and kind of put you around the presentation. So it's, I gotta give Zoom that feedback. But yeah, so that's that. And that's all I really wanted to show. So next week, I would have delved into particulars of that. And then both this week and next week, I would close with just anything particular about the assignment, about the final presentation, that anybody has a question about. And if not, that tells me you've all already met as a group. Your stuff's all in order. Everything's good. Remember, there's a quiz that nobody's done yet. So that's another thing. You all, that broke my heart. I'm going to say that, okay? I got on this morning. I said, let me see. Actually, I went on Saturday, and I said, man, nobody did the quiz like I recommended. I got on this morning. It's like, still nobody did the quiz like I recommended. I'm going to point out, okay? I know, listen, sometimes you think, holy shit, Brent, you've got so many things happening at the same time. And it's weird how some of these schedules go, especially with the week off kind of shifts the deadlines. But I'm telling you, man, if you do the quiz now, like literally now, it's, you see them, there are 11 questions. Don't do them next week, because the presentation's next week, or no, the week after. And then next week, you might be on vacation. You might be trying to take the day off. Just do it. Please, please. That's all I got to say. Thank you for those who promise. I will look. If you say you're going to do it today, just do it. Do it, do it, do it. And then coming up, so I put that in the announcement. So next week is, I think the quiz is due next week. So get that done. There's no more discussions. So the only thing left is this final presentation. So again, prior to the 17th, make sure everything's uploaded. And what I'll do is I will have all the PowerPoints open, and then you can talk through them. Well, sorry, we'll try it both ways, okay? If you want to share your screen, do it. As a backup, I'll have them all open based on what's submitted. And then if I am taking control, you just tell me when to do next slide. So I've done them both ways in the past. whatever you want to do. You have mic control, camera control. So the three presenters will have their cameras on and their mics open. And if you want me to advance slides, you let me, or you just take control of the screen and away you go. Right after completion of the next class, the final exam opens, and I describe that as the easy marks. And all the previous students have laughed after taking it. It's true, false. That's all. So it really is, I said, like the worst, I hate final exams where, you know, I say to you, something like, oh, back in week 3, we talked about blah, blah, blah. And it's some in-depth, insane, stupid question. You're like, oh my God, Brent, really? So it really is just like kind of like a knowledge sweep. And I'll tell you one example question and you can laugh. BIM is equal to Revit, true or false? And if you get that wrong, I will cry. I will cry. I'll tell you, I think everybody has got that question right, so that's good. But that's the nature of the questions. And then some of them might, you know, I won't say none of them are tricky, but I think there's like 50 true false questions, gut instinct, go through them. And then that's the final exam. I think it's a week to do the final exam, and then that's it. Yes, Jaspreet, you want to unmute if you want to ask the question?
Yep. What is the date for submitting the final assignment? That is presentation, PowerPoint presentation.
I think the deadline is 8 right prior to the class of the 17th.
So it's 16th. By 8 p.m. we have to submit our. Is that
what it is? Here, I'll pull it up to be sure. So I want them, and maybe I did do it the day before, because I think I remember actually I think you're right. Sorry. No, I put April 17th at 8 a.m.
That's so generous.
Yeah, I know. I don't like that. I should have put the day before. So one year it was literally until 8 a.m. And then I remember my George Brown students, one didn't even submit, and I'm standing there waiting for them to present. They go, could you open it up for us to submit? And it's just, oh my God, whatever. So yeah, there's only 7 groups. Yeah, so the way I see it is I usually set up down here at about 7 o'clock. So hopefully you've submitted by 7, but I'll just, as long as they're all in there by 8, because the reason is the marking, it's all based on what you present and then what I review after. So it's all, I'm okay with 8 a.m. And then the final exam, since I'm poking through these, just to make sure I'm not misquoting the deadlines here. The final exam is due April 23rd. So that's interesting because originally marks were due on the 22nd. So I would have had to move that to the 21st, but now marks are due the 28th. So you guys have until the Thursday, the 23rd, and then that's it. You guys will be done. But look at that quiz. My goodness. So that quiz is due next Friday. All right. All right. See, one thing I'm debating, and you can give me feedback privately or after, is whether, because these quizzes are just 10, 11, 12 questions, originally I didn't even have a time limit on them. So this year I put a 1-hour time limit, and that's even insane, 1 hour to do 10 questions. But what I'm debating is even to make it a 30-minute time limit and potentially force it to be done on the day. So we have the class, and then maybe I pause, like, cause oftentimes, like now, like we could sign off, anytime. So maybe I force it that day, you close the class, have the quiz, and it's done. No, what do you mean no? Why not? So it's something I'm thinking. I won't do it for you guys, but I'm trying to think, like 2 weeks to do 11 questions. That's a long time, right? So yeah, so just something I'm,
Yeah, but you can give us 2 days, 3 days, that's okay.
Okay, so that's good feedback. 'Cause even that, so that I might change it, because when I opened it on the 27th, so maybe I should have made it, like, imagine they were due 3 days later. So maybe I give the weekend, and then by that next week it's done. Because right now, what sucks about this is based on stuff we talked about now 3 up to 4 weeks ago, right? And the longer you wait, the farther back it gets. So, okay. that's all I have for today. So have a good 2 weeks. If there's any questions on the assignment, throw me an email. I will answer as quickly as possible. And just be ready. Microphones, headsets, whatever you need, be ready, because in 2 weeks, I am the listener and you're all the teacher. All right? But I'm still the marker. So remember that. All right. Have a good weekend and a good couple of weeks, and talk to you all soon. Bye for now.